Have you ever felt like no matter what you do, no matter how hard you work, you're always one step behind? You're not alone. But this isn't a coincidence. It was designed this way. Since the day you were born, you've been part of a system that doesn't want you rich or free or powerful. It wants you small, obedient, trapped. School never taught you about money, but it taught you how to follow orders. The media keeps you entertained, but never informed. Your job? It pays just enough to survive, but never enough to escape. And here's the part no one dares to say out loud. You were programmed to stay poor. Every rule you follow, every belief you hold about success, wealth, and freedom was implanted in you by people who profit from your ignorance. They and the elite don't want thinkers. They want workers. They don't want you asking questions. They want you too tired to even care, because the moment you wake up, their game falls apart. You think you're living in a free country. No, you're living inside a controlled economy, engineered by billionaires, protected by silence, and sustained by your compliance. You've been trained to call it normal, but normal is slavery with a paycheck. Debt is your chain, comfort is your cage, and money? Just the bait. Meanwhile, they move billions across borders, rewrite laws in boardrooms, and print wealth out of thin air, while you beg for raises that barely beat inflation. This isn't just inequality, it's manipulation, it's mental warfare, and unless you understand how deep the programming goes, you'll never break free. But something brought you here. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was pain, or maybe something inside you is waking up. What you're about to hear is not theory, it's not motivation, it's the truth they've spent decades hiding from you. And once you see it, once the code is revealed, there's no turning back. Because after today, you'll never look at your life, your money, or your future the same way again. But to understand how they did it, we need to go back to the very beginning, back to the moment your mind was hijacked. So before we dive deeper, I want to ask you something real, something powerful. If this message is already stirring something inside of you, if you feel the weight of the system, if you've been silently struggling, questioning, praying for a breakthrough, drop a prayer request in the comments below. Let us know what's been keeping you awake at night. Let us know what you're trying to break free from, because you're not alone. And here, we fight together. We're building something different, not just a channel, but a movement. And in this community, we pray for each other. We speak life. We break chains together. Whether you believe in God, the universe, or divine purpose, know this. You were not born to be a slave to this system. And if you're ready to wake up, to break free, to start seeing what the elite never wanted you to know, hit the like button to push this message further. Subscribe because this is just the beginning. And turn on notifications because what we're going to reveal next, they don't want you to hear. Now, let's go deeper. Let me show you how they programmed your mind to stay poor and how you can finally break the code. You wake up every day thinking you're making choices. You decide what to wear, where to go, what to buy. You believe you're free, but you're not. That illusion was sold to you the moment you opened your eyes in this world. It's been reinforced ever since. In school, in the media, in religion, in your job, every layer of your life has been carefully structured to look like freedom, while functioning as a prison. Look around. Everyone rushing to survive, stuck in traffic, eyes locked on screens, deadlines, credit scores, paychecks that vanish before the month ends. And yet, no one stops to ask, why does it always feel like I'm losing? Because you were programmed to lose, not because you're lazy, not because you're not smart enough, but because a hidden structure, built by the elite, was put in place generations ago, designed to keep you distracted, exhausted, and broke. They call it society, but it's not a society, it's a machine, and you're the battery. While you were taught to trade time for money, they were learning how to trade money for power. While you were taught to obey, they were building systems you can't see, with rules you never agreed to, controlling a game you didn't know existed. And the most terrifying part? It worked. You chase promotions while they print wealth. You fight over politics while they fund both sides. You're told to vote, to choose, to believe in change, but every path leads back to them. The same last names, the same empires, the same rituals behind closed doors. No one taught you how wealth actually works. No one taught you that the real economy isn't built on hard work. It's built on access, knowledge, networks, secrets, because that knowledge is forbidden. You were taught to worship money, but never to understand it. You were taught to fear debt, but never to see how they use it to build empires. You were taught to chase success but never shown that success was never meant for people like you. You were never free. You were managed. There is a reason the richest 1% control 95% of the world's wealth. And it's not talent. It's not hustle. It's a system, a manipulated system, crafted, tested, and perfected through centuries of control. Their power doesn't come from votes. It comes from ownership, land, banks, media, resources, laws, education, technology. Every institution you trust is an extension of their reach, and every time you try to rise, something pushes you back down. Have you ever wondered why? Why your savings vanish during every crisis? Why you always seem one emergency away from collapse? Why inflation eats your future alive while billionaires double their fortunes? Because the crises are not accidents, they are weapons, engineered to transfer wealth from the bottom to the top, to keep you reacting while they keep planning, to keep you believing in bad luck while they expand control with precision. And while you're watching sports, scrolling, paying bills, they're meeting in rooms you'll never see, making decisions that will shape your children's future before they're even born. This is not freedom, it's a simulation, a matrix, a spiritual warfare hidden inside economics, a psychological war disguised as routine. You were taught to trust the very system designed to enslave you, financially, mentally, and spiritually. And here's the cruelest twist. You were made to believe that if you're still poor, it's your fault. That if you haven't escaped, you didn't work hard enough. That if you're tired, broken, behind, it's because you're not enough, but you are. You're just trapped in a blueprint that was never meant to serve you. A digital cage, an invisible code, a lifelong hypnotic suggestion masked as normal life. This is the kind of truth that makes your stomach turn. This is the part where some will click away, because seeing it means you can't unsee it. Because once your mind awakens, the system can no longer hold you. But that's why they've buried this knowledge so deep. That's why it's mocked, silenced, labeled as conspiracy. Because if enough people wake up, the power structure falls. And maybe right now you're one of the few beginning to see. Maybe you're piecing together what they never wanted you to know. Maybe now things are starting to make sense. So go ahead, write it in the comments. They control everything. The truth is finally out. This can't stay hidden forever, because every time you speak it, it gets louder. Every time you share it, the matrix glitches, and every time someone new opens their eyes, the system loses a little more control. But don't stop now, because if this is what they did to your mind, wait until you see what they did to your soul, and what happens when you try to take it back. They told you the path was simple. Go to school, get good grades, follow the rules. Then college, job, paycheck, retirement. They promised stability, they promised respect. But you ended up buried in student loans before your life even began, and now you're trapped in a loop so well designed you forgot to ask who built it and why. It starts early, the quiet indoctrination. You're told what to memorize, not what to question. You're taught compliance, not thinking. Every bell, every test, every ranking isn't education, it's calibration, preparing your mind for a life of silent obedience. Have you ever noticed how school never taught you about credit, interest rates, taxes, or real wealth creation? Why would they? That kind of knowledge wasn't meant for you. What you got instead was the illusion of choice, a controlled menu of acceptable futures. Doctor, engineer, lawyer, accountant. But no one mentioned ownership. No one whispered that real wealth lives in assets, not salaries. That real freedom starts with control, not credentials. Because the system wasn't designed to set you free. It was designed to harvest your time. The school fed you into the workforce. The workforce fed you into debt. And debt, that silent parasite, became your master. You were never meant to retire rich. You were meant to retire tired. Think about it. Decades of labor for what? A pension that's barely enough to survive? A house that isn't fully yours until you've paid 3 times its value? Healthcare that's only accessible after you've broken your body? This isn't a glitch, it's a blueprint. A manipulated reality engineered by unseen hands. A billionaire agenda stretching across generations. Enforced not by soldiers, but by social norms. Get a job. Be responsible. Don't take risks. Stay in your lane. But whose lane is it really? And who profits every time you take one more step in the direction they told you to? Behind the veil of education and employment lies an economic conspiracy so well disguised that even the most intelligent minds fall for it. It's not that the system is broken, it's that it was never built for you to win. The elite, they don't follow the path you were given. Their children don't drown in student loans. They don't trade hours for dollars. They inherit assets, networks, and access to knowledge you were never allowed to touch. While you were sitting in fluorescent-lit classrooms being taught to raise your hand, they were sitting in boardrooms learning how to control nations. You see, education was never neutral. It was a ritual, a spiritual sedative, not to empower you, but to program you. Program you to accept the rules, to believe in authority, to seek approval, to fear failure, to surrender control. And then they told you to dream big, but only within the limits of what serves the system. Start a business? Risky. Buy real estate? Complicated. Crypto? Dangerous. Stocks? Leave it to the professionals. But 40 years in a cubicle? Safe. This is the wealth code inversion. A secret so simple it hides in plain sight. You were taught to serve money. The elite were taught to command it. But it doesn't end at work. Because even after all those years, when your body is worn and your hope is thin, the trap doesn't release you. That's when they come for the last pieces. Your time, your savings, your mind. Retirement becomes another illusion, sold to you with pictures of beaches and sunsets, while inflation silently erodes your last breath of security. And still you wonder, why hasn't this worked for me? Because it was never supposed to. This is not about failure. It's about design. A hidden system so sophisticated, it made you believe slavery was progress. It made you feel proud of being useful to a machine that consumes your life in exchange for numbers on a screen. It's spiritual, it's psychological, it's economic, it's war. They called it the American dream. But if you look closely, you'll realize the dream was never yours. It belonged to the architects. You were just allowed to rent it. And every piece of this, school, job, debt, taxes, wasn't just about money. It was about control, spiritual control. A war not just for your paycheck, but for your perception, to blind you from the real enemy, to convince you the cage was comfort, to disguise slavery as honor. You were handed a life that looked like freedom, but felt like suffocation. And the more questions you asked, the more resistance you felt. The more truth you uncovered, the more invisible walls surrounded you. Because truth has always been a threat to power, especially the kind of truth that makes people dangerous. So the system responds with fear, shame, mockery. It punishes those who step outside the script. It rewards those who stay silent. But deep down, you've always known something was wrong. Maybe it was the anxiety before work. Maybe it was the panic in your chest when another bill hit. Maybe it was that sinking feeling that this couldn't possibly be what life is about. And you were right. But what they fear most is that you'll stop blaming yourself, that you'll start seeing the matrix for what it is, that you'll begin to recognize the invisible strings pulling your every move, that you'll realize this trap, this beautifully crafted, centuries-old financial illusion, was never meant to serve you. It was meant to feed off you, and once you wake up to that, everything changes. But it's not enough to see the illusion. You need to know what's behind it, who built it, and what they're hiding now. Because the deeper you go, the darker it gets. And just beyond the next layer, something even more disturbing begins to surface. They never needed chains. They never needed cages, fences, or locked doors. They only needed your mind, because the most effective prison is the one you never see. And poverty, the kind that lingers generation after generation, isn't about a lack of money. It's about a design, a program, a silent infection in the mind, written into your beliefs before you were old enough to understand what freedom even meant. It starts with a whisper. You hear it from your parents who heard it from theirs. Work hard. Be grateful. Money doesn't grow on trees. Rich people are greedy. People like us don't get rich. These aren't just phrases. They're installations. Lines of mental code that train you to survive, not to rise. And the ones who benefit from this code? They're not living paycheck to paycheck. They're not surviving anything. They're winning because you were taught never to enter the game. That's how financial slavery works. Not with force, but with repetition. Not through violence, but through obedience. You were trained to play small, to accept your place, to shrink your dreams to fit their economy. And while you recite the rules they gave you, they rewrite them in the background. The elite understood something centuries ago that most people still don't. Wealth isn't physical. It's psychological. Control the mind, and you control the future. They don't need to take your freedom if you willingly give it up in exchange for comfort. It's why every institution you've ever trusted, school, media, government, even family structures, feed you the same story. A story of limitation, scarcity, fear, submission. a story where questioning is punished and obedience is rewarded. But who wrote that story? And why has it never worked for you? Have you ever noticed that the people who work the hardest often earn the least? That the most exhausted, loyal, disciplined individuals still struggle to escape basic survival? And have you ever noticed that those at the top, the billionaires, the power brokers, don't just work less? They think differently. There's a reason for that. They operate on a different code. You were taught to measure wealth in dollars. They measure it in leverage. You were taught to sacrifice your time. They buy time in bulk. You were taught to play it safe. They exploit the risks you were too afraid to take. Because here's the truth they never wanted you to learn. You were programmed to be poor. And not just financially, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. They wrote a script so convincing, so familiar, that you internalized it as truth. But it was never truth. It was a system, a manipulated system. A manufactured version of reality calibrated to benefit a very specific class of people, and it was never yours. Let me show you. Take a man named Thomas, 30 years old, honest, disciplined, loyal. He wakes up at 6 a.m. every morning, drinks cheap coffee and clocks in to a job that doesn't care if he lives or dies. He's been told he's doing the right thing. He works 6 days a week, pays his taxes, keeps his head down, but no matter what he does, the money never stays. The bills never stop. The fear never leaves. He doesn't drink, doesn't gamble, doesn't waste, but he's always broke. Why? Because Thomas isn't failing. Thomas is following the exact program they installed in him, the same program that told him wealth was for other people, that ambition was selfish, that investing was risky, that working harder was the solution. Even when the harder he worked, the more they took. They took his time, his energy, his identity, and he thanked them for it. Now multiply Thomas by millions. An entire society of people just like him, stuck in a loop, not because they're incapable, but because the game was never theirs to win. What if you're Thomas? What if the thoughts in your head, the fears that hold you back, the hesitation every time you try to break the pattern, aren't yours at all? What if they were installed in you? What if the rules you live by weren't designed to protect you but to contain you? Because here's what they never wanted you to figure out. The real war is spiritual. The real chains are invisible. And the real code, the poverty code, was designed to be passed down like a virus, disguised as common sense, wrapped in culture, normalized by repetition. You were never poor. You were conditioned to feel poor, so you'd never dare to act rich, so you'd never ask too many questions, so you'd stay busy chasing just enough so you'd hand over your power, generation after generation, to a system that rewards silence and punishes awakening. But the cracks are beginning to show. People are waking up. You can feel it. You've seen it. The narrative is breaking, the matrix is flickering, and for the first time, the shadows are pulling away from the walls. Some are beginning to whisper, they control everything. The truth is finally out. This can't stay hidden forever. And yet, most still sleep, because waking up isn't safe. It comes with discomfort, with rage, with grief. It forces you to look at everything you were taught and ask, was it ever true? And if it wasn't, then who am I without it? That's the point they fear most, that you'll begin to rebuild your reality, brick by brick, outside the boundaries they created for you, that you'll realize poverty was never your identity, that it was just the residue of a systemic lie, a lie crafted by unseen power, maintained by spiritual warfare, and enforced by your own unquestioning belief. But belief can be rewritten, and when it is, so can everything else. The question is, how deep are you willing to go? Because what you've seen so far is only the surface, and what lies beneath was never meant to be found. While you were learning to solve equations and memorize dates, they were learning how to control capital. While you were being graded on obedience, they were being groomed in boardrooms. While you were taught how to be useful, they were taught how to be untouchable. This is not a theory. It's a structure. A hidden system of knowledge, not taught in public schools, not found in textbooks, passed down behind closed doors by families who don't just study wealth, they manufacture it. They never taught their children how to get a job, because they never planned for them to need one. You were trained to earn, they were trained to own. That's the first fracture in the illusion. The moment you realize there's more than one financial reality, one designed for the masses, and another reserved for those born behind the velvet curtain. You were raised inside the meritocracy myth. Do well, follow the rules, and you'll be rewarded. But the elite operate by an entirely different code. A wealth code so precise, so ruthlessly effective, that it renders conventional financial advice useless. Their education begins early, not in crowded classrooms, but in private sessions with tax strategists, estate planners, hedge fund architects, and geopolitical analysts. They don't learn what to think, they learn how the world actually works. Where you were taught to fear debt, they learn how to weaponize it. Where you were warned about risk, they learn how to insure and diversify it. Where you were told to save, they learn how to scale. Because they understand something most never will. Money is not real, power is. And power is not earned, it's engineered. They engineer it through trust structures that protect their assets from taxation, through offshore accounts in jurisdictions where transparency dies and wealth multiplies, through private equity deals that never make the news but quietly reshape entire industries, through philanthropic foundations that serve as both moral armor and tax havens. They don't play the game, they build the rules. And if you ever wondered why billionaires can lose billions and still come out richer, it's because they're not really losing. They're repositioning, shifting pieces on a board you weren't even invited to look at. This is strategic invisibility, the art of appearing broke on paper while controlling empires in reality, the art of disappearing behind trusts, layers of corporations, and international loopholes. And it's all taught, silently, systematically, handed down through rituals of power no classroom would dare replicate. The curriculum of the elite includes how to convert liability into leverage, how to influence policy without ever holding office, how to bend markets using only information, how to build a dynasty that outlives any single economy. They understand that real security doesn't come from income, it comes from insulation, the ability to remain untouched while others collapse. The power to pivot before storms hit, because they see the weather patterns forming long before the public does. You were told to get a good job, but they never thought in terms of jobs. They think in terms of jurisdictions, networks, tax codes, and influence. They measure success not by what they earn, but by what they control. And while you're celebrating a raise, they're acquiring the company that employs you. While you're paying off debt, they're using debt as a tax shield. While you're saving 10% of your salary, they're moving 8 figures through instruments you've never even heard of. You were taught to avoid taxes by earning less. They were taught to eliminate taxes by restructuring reality. It's not fair. It's not meant to be. Because fairness isn't a priority in this system, and control is. They do not need to be more intelligent. They need to be more informed. And that information, the kind that changes everything, is intentionally kept from you. Public schools don't fail to teach financial literacy by accident. They're designed that way. Because true financial literacy isn't about budgeting or saving. It's about systems, sovereignty, and strategic escape from economic dependency. And if you knew what they knew, you'd stop playing defense and start redesigning your life, but that's not what they want. They want you compliant, predictable, profitable. They want you thinking that the next promotion is your way out. That another degree will fix the trap. That financial security is just one more sacrifice away. Meanwhile, their children are being taught how to collapse markets and still profit, how to build shadow portfolios, how to position themselves to benefit from crisis. Because every global disaster is an opportunity to them. Where you see chaos, they see arbitrage. Where you see recession, they see consolidation. Where you see collapse, they see acquisition. And they don't just react to events, they engineer them. From the outside it looks like chance, but from within the circles of unseen power, it's choreography. A deliberate sequence of influence, capital, and silence, coordinated to keep you in a financial trap so elegant, you mistake it for stability. And if you try to explain this to most people, they'll laugh. They'll call it paranoia or conspiracy or delusion. But deep down, they know. They've felt the weight of something they can't name. They've watched the rich get richer no matter what. They've played by the rules and still lost. And they've begun to wonder, what if the rules were never real? What if success was never about effort, but access? What if everything they taught us was just a way to keep the gates closed? Because when you start asking those questions, you stop being manageable. You become unpredictable. And unpredictability is the one thing this engineered system cannot tolerate. So they'll distract you. They'll divide you. They'll feed you headlines and movements and products to keep you busy. They'll make you feel seen, without ever letting you see the mechanism behind the curtain. Because if you did, even for a second, you'd realize this isn't about money at all. It's about power. It's about control. It's about a billionaire agenda that doesn't just shape economies, it shapes minds. And the more you learn, the more you start to feel it. The pattern, the rhythm, the unspoken design. You begin to see that the world doesn't operate the way you were told, that somewhere along the line the truth was buried, not lost, but intentionally hidden. And just as the dust begins to settle, another layer emerges, a darker one they've protected for centuries, and you're about to see it. Look closely, not at what's in front of you, but behind it. What if I told you the world you wake up in every day isn't real, not in the sense of holograms or simulations, but in the way it was built, designed, and programmed to shape your choices before you ever made them? You don't live in a society. You live in a system, a manipulated system that feeds off your belief in it and collapses the moment you question it. From the moment you opened your eyes, they began the process. They hypnotized you, not with swinging clocks or soothing voices, with repetition, with screens, with silence, with fear, with routine. They showed you a world where bills are normal, exhaustion is success, anxiety is adulthood, and freedom is dangerous. And you bought it. We all did. Because they didn't just teach you how to live, they taught you how to obey. You learned to follow the line, chase the grade, fear the risk, and submit to the machine, but you didn't choose the machine. You were born into it. And like any system designed for control, it had to make itself invisible, because if you could see the cage, you'd fight to escape. So instead, they built one inside your mind. It looks like a phone. It sounds like the news. It feels like comfort, but it's control. A constant feed of information designed to keep you reactive, not reflective, to keep you scrolling, comparing, consuming, but never creating. You're not thinking, you're repeating. Every ad, every headline, every social media trend, every financial headline about uncertain markets, inflation fears, or rising rates. It's a hypnosis loop, and it works. Because while you're panicking over gas prices, they're buying real estate. While you're debating over left versus right, they're printing wealth into existence. While you're trapped in a financial panic, they're orchestrating the storm. And the worst part? You feel it. You know something is wrong. But when you try to name it, it disappears into smoke. Because this isn't a physical prison. It's a spiritual trap, disguised as modern life. They told you hard work equals success. But you've been working for years, and you're still stuck. They said education would unlock doors. But all you unlocked was debt. They said technology would free us. But it watches us instead. This is the financial matrix. And you were never meant to escape it, because the system doesn't want thinkers. It wants products. It wants you medicated, distracted, broke, not dead, just dependent. Every dollar you spend is tracked, every move analyzed. Your behavior is modeled, predicted, sold, and used against you. You are the commodity, and the more predictable you are, the more profitable you become. The elite don't fear poverty. They engineer it. They've turned the economy into a casino, where they hold the cards, the chips, and the rules. They gamble with your future, then tell you to work harder when they lose and you obey. Because that's what you were taught. You were programmed to accept, to comply, to nod, to say, that's just how it is. But what if that's not how it is? What if nothing about this life was ever natural? The 9 to 5 invented, consumer debt, manufactured, endless taxes, collapsing pensions, skyrocketing inflation, all part of the design. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You begin to realize that the most dangerous virus in society isn't fear, it's obedience without awareness. And the cure? Awakening. But awakening is brutal because it strips away the safety of illusion. It burns through the lies you've lived in. It shatters the image of the world you thought you knew. You begin to see the signs you used to miss, the glazed-over eyes in traffic, the soulless stares in offices, the compulsive tapping on screens, even when nothing is there. Eyes locked on numbers, deadlines, debt. You're surrounded by people who look alive, but have been mentally disconnected from their true selves, hypnotized, trained, tamed. This is spiritual warfare, hidden in the language of economics, and no one's coming to save you from it. Because those who built it don't want you saved, they want you sedated. They want you earning just enough to stay quiet, consuming just enough to feel included, struggling just enough to stay afraid. Because fear is the most effective form of control. Fear of being broke, fear of being alone, fear of being different. So you conform, you imitate, you accept the narrative, and call it truth. But deep beneath that programming, a spark remains. The part of you that remembers something more. The part of you that feels the lie, even when you can't explain it. Maybe that's what brought you here. Maybe something inside you is waking up. Because the Matrix doesn't want you to think. It wants you to repeat, to consume, to obey, to fear freedom. But what happens when you stop? When you unplug from the narratives? When you finally realize that you were never free, only programmed to believe you were? You were hypnotized into believing that security was safety, that debt was normal, that struggle was noble. But it was all part of the billionaire script, a set of rituals disguised as daily life. A dark knowledge passed between power circles to ensure that those who wake up never make it out. Unless you begin to trace the threads, follow the patterns, decode the repetition, then maybe, just maybe, the matrix begins to flicker. And when it does, something ancient starts to echo beneath the noise. A truth you were never meant to hear. A truth hidden deeper than money, older than governments, more dangerous than any weapon. And once you hear it, you can never go back. So now you've seen the machine. You've felt it press against your chest. You've stared into its eyes and finally understood that it was never broken. It was built this way. The system didn't fail you. It was never meant to serve you. It was meant to extract you, to drain you, to program you into a worker, a debtor, a number in a file, valuable not for your potential, but for your predictability. And once you saw it, really saw it, you realized something terrifying. You were never free. Only taught to believe you were. But here's what they never accounted for. Awareness. Not the kind they offer in headlines. Not the fake empowerment sold in commercials. No, the real kind. The quiet ignition of a mind waking up. The flicker of rebellion behind your eyes. The realization that if this world was designed, it can be redesigned. Because once you become aware of the rituals, the patterns, the billionaire agenda, you can begin to reverse engineer it. And that's the moment you stop being a slave and start becoming a threat. But here's the part they hope you never hear. You can break the code, not by protesting, not by waiting for a savior, not by hoping the system will collapse and rebuild itself, but by turning inward, by taking what they use to control you and using it to liberate yourself, because everything they used to keep you trapped, your mind, your habits, your beliefs, can be reprogrammed. That's the first real weapon, mental sovereignty. Think about it. They didn't steal your money first. They stole your attention. They stole your beliefs. They convinced you that struggle was virtue, that suffering meant you were doing it right, that poverty was noble and wealth was suspicious. You were hypnotized into worshipping sacrifice and fearing power. But you're not here to suffer. You were never supposed to survive. You were meant to command. So ask yourself, what if the cage is still open? What if the lock was never real? Because the same system that built your limitations also left behind the blueprint. And if you know where to look, if you train your mind to decode the symbols, to see through the illusion, to think in terms of systems instead of struggle, everything changes. The truth is, the elite didn't just hoard money, they hoarded mental frameworks. They passed down thought patterns, language, behaviors that breed wealth like clockwork. It wasn't magic, it was memory, generational data, reinforced rituals. And those rituals can be hijacked, because wealth was never about effort, it was about alignment. The elite align their thoughts with their decisions, their habits with their vision, their time with their legacy. And most people, they align their energy with survival. They align their beliefs with fear. They align their future with someone else's past. But you can change that, not with motivation, with mental rewiring. What you read, what you say, what you allow into your consciousness. The stories you repeat, the identities you attach to. Because every time you say, I'm broke, you reinforce the system. Every time you say, I can't afford that, you install another line of code. But when you say, this system is not mine, when you ask, who benefits from me thinking this way, when you start replacing reaction with response, fear with strategy, emotion with discipline, that's when you shift timelines. That's when you exit the loop. The financial matrix is not held together by force, it's held together by consent. You were tricked into giving it, but now you can revoke it. And when you do, you begin to detach from their frequency. You stop playing their game. You stop trading your time for scraps, your mind for entertainment, your peace for distraction. You start asking different questions. What am I building? Who owns what I produce? Why am I still plugged into a system that feeds off my fatigue? These are not questions for the masses. These are liberator questions. And every time you ask them, you peel back another layer of the matrix. Every time you resist the old impulse to consume, to panic, to obey, you install a new neural path. And those paths, they don't just change you, they fracture the entire manipulated reality, because when one person breaks free, they open the door for others. And the elite know this. That's why they pour billions into distractions, why your screen is flooded with noise, why everything from your diet to your entertainment is coded to lower your frequency, why they normalize depression but ridicule vision, because the last thing they want is an aware population. A generation that says, I see the trap, and I refuse to keep walking into it, because when enough people say that, the trap stops working. But awareness is not enough. You must act, internally, systematically, repetitively, because the code that enslaved you was installed repetitively, so it must be deconstructed the same way. Every day you train. Every day you remove what no longer serves your evolution. Every day you choose creation over consumption, clarity over chaos, intention over impulse. This is the real rebellion, not with fists or flags, but with focused minds and disciplined souls. This is spiritual control reclaimed. And it's not easy, because the system is still watching. It still wants you back. It will lure you with comfort. It will threaten you with isolation. It will whisper the old commands. You're nothing without us. You'll fail. Don't think too big. But now you know the voice, and you know it lies, because you've seen the code, and more importantly, you've felt the fracture. You felt the moment your thoughts stopped echoing theirs, the moment you stepped into a timeline of your own making. And now the only question that remains is how far you're willing to go, because if this much was hidden, what else are they still trying to keep from you? But now, you've seen too much to turn back. You've walked through the noise, the illusions, the walls that kept you boxed in, and something inside you knows, this isn't just information. This is the beginning of war, a silent one, not fought with weapons, but with perception, power, and programming. They trained you to stay asleep. They designed your days so you'd never ask, why does this always feel off? But now the questions are louder than the answers. You've realized that the trap wasn't just external. It was built into how you think, how you spend, how you breathe. You've felt it, in your gut, in the weight of every bill, every hour sold, every dream sacrificed at the altar of stability. And the worst part? They made you feel grateful for it. That was their final trick, convincing you that the cage was a gift. But now, here you are, not just watching a video, but sitting at the edge of a deeper reality, and you feel it, the fracture, the shift, the glitch in the matrix. The moment your soul starts remembering something older, something truer, something they worked hard to bury under layers of financial slavery and manufactured despair. And maybe for the first time in your life, you're ready to admit it. You were never free, you were never meant to be, because freedom in this world is not granted, it's hacked. It's earned through awareness, through resistance, through breaking generational code, with the raw edge of new truth. But truth comes with a cost, because when you wake up, the world doesn't welcome you, it resists you. Friends won't understand, family will question you, strangers will mock you. You'll feel alone until you realize that was the point. Isolation is how they break the few who see too clearly. But here's the thing they don't see coming. Some of us were built in the dark. Some of us were forged in silence, programmed like everyone else, but broken just enough to notice the seams. And those seams, that's where we begin to escape. The real ones, the ones who question, who watch, who connect the dots, aren't waiting for a hero. They're becoming one. And now that you're seeing the map for what it is, you're probably wondering something deeper. Something that's been haunting the edges of your thoughts since we started. Who designed this? Who benefits from this structure staying intact? Who sits at the center of the web, pulling strings, bending markets, controlling narratives? Because here's where it gets darker and more dangerous. This system, this perfectly calibrated mechanism of obedience and financial fatigue, wasn't an accident. It was built, and it wasn't built by politicians, or bankers, or CEOs. Those are just faces, puppets, public avatars of a deeper power. No. The architects of your reality are faceless, untouchable, and far older than you think. And they don't work in years or quarters. They work in centuries. Their tools aren't spreadsheets, they're rituals. Their playground isn't politics, it's perception. They don't care about your votes, they care about your attention. And they've invested generations perfecting the art of keeping you blind while believing you're awake. You want to know why you were born into debt, why the media floods you with fear, why school never taught you about leverage, about sovereignty, about how money actually moves. Because it's not supposed to, because knowledge is control, and if you had the code, they'd lose the cage. That's why 95% of the world's wealth is locked inside a system most people will never even know exists. Not because it's hidden, but because it's disguised, beneath complexity, distraction, and deliberate miseducation. A hidden system, not illegal, but invisible. It doesn't live in headlines. It lives in the shadows between headlines. It doesn't move through protests. It moves through networks, offshore trusts, dynastic wealth protection, lobby pipelines, data capture, spiritual suppression, and the few who dare to expose it, they're silenced, discredited, mocked. Because once you start revealing the infrastructure of control, the game changes. But here's the part they can't stop. Once an idea is seen, it can't be unseen. And now, you've seen it. You've walked too close to the edge. You've heard the sound beneath the noise. And whether you admit it out loud or not, you know there's more. You can't look at a paycheck the same. You can't scroll through headlines the same. You can't hear politicians talk about saving the economy without feeling the nausea of knowing it's all a stage. And you were cast as the extra, never the writer. You are not supposed to know this. You're supposed to sleep, to spend, to repeat. But not today. Today, something cracked open. And what comes next? They've spent centuries trying to keep buried, because what you've seen so far, it's just the front gate, the illusion of the matrix, the edge of the ritual. But in the next chapter we go inside, into the system behind all systems, the one that consolidates 95% of the world's wealth into the hands of the few, the one built not just to take your money, but to mold your spirit, to break your inner rebellion before it ever awakens. You want to know who they really are. You want to see the faces behind the curtains. You want to understand how billionaires are made before they're even born. Then meet me in the next video. Because there, we name the architects, we trace the wires, we pull the curtain, and nothing you believe will survive what's coming. And if you made it this far, I want to know you're with me. This isn't just content. This is a resistance. Drop a comment right now with the words, "They control everything," or "Now it makes sense," because it's time we start finding each other. It's time to build what they've always feared, a population that sees through the smoke and starts setting fires of their own. And if you're really ready to take the next step, to enter the level they never wanted you to reach, click on the next video now. 95% of the world's wealth is controlled by this secret system. Your awakening is just getting started. If something in this video shook you, if you didn't just hear words, but felt a voice inside you whisper, "This message is for you," that wasn't just emotion. That wasn't coincidence. That was God calling your spirit out of the system. And if you felt that, if something inside you finally woke up, subscribe to this channel right now, because this is not entertainment, this is a calling, and you're here for a reason. If you stayed until the very end, drop this in the comments so I know who you are. I heard his voice, I'm awake now. Let that be your declaration, a signal to the algorithm and to the heavens. Leave a like if this message hit you, not for vanity, but to push this truth into the darkness they've tried to cover it with. And above all, don't stop here. Click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now. 95% of the world's wealth is controlled by this secret system, because this was just the beginning.